Alright, so I got an absolutely amazing article here for you guys, which was basically just a write-up of some recent statements from the billionaire co-founder of Home Depot, this guy Bernie Marcus, who has some thoughts about the current state of the American workforce. Okay, so here from the New York Post. They say Home Depot co-founder says socialism killed motivation to work. Quote, nobody gives a damn. Okay, so I can't even prepare you guys for what he's about to say in this article, but I mean, obviously, just right off the bat, socialism killed motivation to work. I don't know. I mean, last time I checked, we live in the United States, not exactly a socialist utopia, certainly not by my standards as an actual socialist, but, we are essentially living in the center of global capitalism, and you are a literal billionaire, okay, who founded or co-founded a capitalist enterprise, okay, and you're sitting here talking about how this non-existent sort of like monster of socialism within the United States is apparently making it so that no workers are willing to actually put in work anymore. Okay, so anyways, let's just go ahead and see what he says here, right? So they start off saying, the 93-year-old billionaire co-founder of Home Depot blamed socialism, like what socialism? What are you talking about here, man? Right? Socialism for Americans lacking the motivation to work, and warned that the future of capitalism is in danger. Wow, okay, the future of capitalism is in danger. You love to see it, right? I mean, if he says it, I guess it might be true, right? Hopefully capitalism is in danger. I mean, it's certainly imploding in on itself, given the current state of the average American worker. Yes, 100%. The neoliberal era has, been defined by imploding capitalism and worsening wealth inequality to the point where, over the last couple of decades, as pointed out by this Time article here, which is based off of a Rand Corporation study, which I've talked about extensively on this channel before, but I mean, we have basically gotten to a situation in this country where, the top 1%, as I point out here, of Americans have taken $50 trillion, $50 trillion from the bottom 90%. And that's made the U.S. less secure. So they actually run the math on this in this article and like in the study that they're talking about and referencing here. They ran the math on this. And basically what this works out to be is like over the last number of decades, basically during the neoliberal era within the United States, the 1% has stolen about $1,400 a month out of the pockets of every single American across the board. Okay, so think about how much money that actually adds up to be, right? $50 trillion from the bottom 90%. And obviously that's led to another situation where we now have 63% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, okay, including somehow nearly half of six-figure earners, okay, which obviously then gets into conversations about the cost of healthcare and education and childcare and, housing for that matter, to the point where even some six-figure earners are like barely scraping by, paycheck to paycheck. Now, obviously, if you're earning $100,000, $200,000, you're much, much better off than somebody who's an average worker at, Amazon or Walmart or something like that. But still, I mean, a vast majority of the American people working paycheck to paycheck. And this guy is like, no, it's, not capitalism and its inherent flaws in this widening wealth gap and historic levels of inequality and the fact that Americans are barely scraping by, they can barely afford to keep a roof over their head, food on the table for themselves and their families. None of that, none of the failures of capitalism are, to blame for the fact that capitalism is now in danger. It must be this like mysterious, amorphous, threat of socialism within this country that has been causing all of this, turning against capitalism and its inherent flaws and failures. But okay, so they continue saying Bernie Marcus, this guy, who along with Arthur Blank built Home Depot into a nationwide empire from just two stores founded in Atlanta in the late 1970s, told the Financial Times on Thursday, saying nobody works. Nobody works. What does that even mean? I mean, what are you talking about? We have what? I don't know, like 5%, 6% unemployment in this country right now. What exactly do you mean by nobody works? I mean, we have people in this country who are working multiple jobs and they still are barely getting by. And this motherfucker, who is 93 years old and is a literal billionaire who has gotten his wealth by profiting off of the backs of his workers and extracting surplus value from the labor that they are actually putting in to make him obscenely wealthy. Okay, that's who this guy is, right? So why don't you get off your ass and maybe, I don't know, you go get a job or something, 93-year-old fuck. But he continues, it doesn't just stop there. He says, just give it to me. Send me money. I guess he's doing an impression of his workers here. Just give it to me. Send me money. I don't want to work. I'm too lazy. I'm too fat. I'm too stupid. Marcus said about what he perceived as the attitude permeating the country. Okay, this is how billionaires think of you. Okay, this is how your average billionaire. Now, this guy is brave enough to come out and say this openly, right? But this is the same thing as what Elon thinks and what Jeff Bezos thinks and Bill Gates. They think you are scum. They think you are little cockroaches. They think you are cogs in a machine that are just supposed to churn out profits for them and to shut up about it, to not try to fight for better working conditions, better pay, better benefits, a union for that matter. None of that. Just shut up, be good little worker bees, and don't question any of our structures, any of our systems that are geared and oriented against you and against your material interests. No, he just summarizes the entire situation as saying, just give it to me, send me money. I don't want to work. I can't get over this, man. I'm too lazy, I'm too fat, I'm too stupid. That's what he thinks of American workers. I mean, Jesus Christ. You know, I mean, it's one thing to try to make an argument that, like, okay, you know, maybe some workers are slacking or something like that. But again, we're talking about a situation right now where even if you were to compare the United States' current economic situation and economic disparity between average workers in the top 0.001%, like this motherfucker, right? If you were going to compare this to, 100 years ago or so during the robber baron era or during the Gilded Age, we currently have worse wealth inequality than the Gilded Age. Okay, so we are like looking at a historic example of how average workers are not being rewarded for the value of their labor that they are putting in at companies like Home Depot. And this motherfucker is just saying, I'm too lazy, I'm too fat, I'm too stupid, okay? And he says, nobody gives a damn. But they continue. It gets even better, right? He says, or they say, the longtime Republican backer, okay, of course he's a Republican donor. Obviously, Democrats and Republicans both take corporate donations from, people like this guy and billionaire donations. So it's a bipartisan thing. This guy happens to lean much more far right. But they say the longtime Republican backer ticked down a list of people that he blamed for standing in the way of private enterprise, including President Joe Biden, quote, the woke people, which, again, as we talked about when I covered what Ron DeSantis means by woke, it basically just means anybody who wants to do a systemic or a structural analysis of some of the problems in the United States. That's just basically the all-encompassing definition of the word woke. But apparently President Biden, the woke people, news media, Harvard graduates, MBAs, lawyers, and accountants, okay, they're all somehow standing in the way of private enterprise, right? President Biden, leader of the socialist, communist, Marxist, Leninist vanguard, apparently, in this guy's mind, okay? So this is how deranged a lot of these billionaires have gotten, right? You have somebody like Joe Biden, who is like a neoliberal through and through, who has been a proud capitalist for his entire career and still is to this day. And what is the most like left-wing policy that he's actually tried to get passed? I mean, maybe you could say the $15 minimum wage, but he didn't even really get that passed. Maybe you could say like a couple of stimulus checks or something, which were watered down from what his original promise was. Maybe you could say the temporary child tax credit, which was like eviscerated into a million pieces by Joe Manchin, the corrupt millionaire coal baron from West Virginia. Joe Biden just sat idly by and let him do that. I mean, you had a lot of good programs that were within Build Back Better that he's proposed, but again, let that get torn up into a million pieces. So you're talking about a guy like Joe Biden, who is basically just like a corporate stooge, a neoliberal, but sort of like mildly a neoliberal light, where he's like, okay, as I'm giving handouts to the wealthy, as I continue to be subservient to the military industrial complex in corporate America, I'm just gonna like sprinkle a few crumbs on the heads of American workers, right? Few crumbs here and there. And that's who this guy is basically classifying as like a socialist, okay? It's absolutely hilarious, right? He continues. He says, I'm worried about capitalism. Good. I mean, you should be. And it's, a worry that you should have because of people like you who have this sort of like stringent pro-capitalist authoritarian ideology economically. And, that, again, especially during the neoliberal era, is what's led to capitalism imploding in on itself. And what has led to, workers actually especially over the last couple of months in recent years, been trying to actually fight for better working conditions and wages and benefits through unionization attempts. So, I mean, you should be worried about capitalism, but you're kind of identifying the wrong reasons as to why capitalism is currently in danger. But they say that his net worth is estimated by Bloomberg at $5.25 billion. Okay, he's worth $5.25 billion, accumulated all of that off of the backs of his workers for the most part. And he has the audacity to say that, this is the fault of workers being too lazy or something. Nobody wants to work anymore. What are you doing? What are you doing right now to contribute to the American economy other than just being a leech? Okay, he continues. Capitalism is the basis of Home Depot, and millions of people have earned this success and had success. Okay, are you talking about your workers, or are you talking about, okay, so here he goes. He's talking about other capitalist enterprises and the, tip of the top of who works at those and who control those organizations as well. So he says, I'm talking manufacturers, vendors, distributors, and people who work for us who have been able to enrich themselves by the journey of Home Depot. Okay, again, critical flaw in your analysis there, because you're talking about other capitalist enterprises. You're talking about corporations. You're talking about CEOs, executives who have been able to enrich themselves. Your average worker at a Home Depot is not going to be able to enrich themselves because of how the structure of capitalism is oriented to keep them down, right? This isn't something where you are sharing in the wealth that this company is generating, right? In fact, the more wealth, the more profits that you want to extract from any various company, but including Home Depot, the more that you want to extract, that means the less that your workers are being fairly rewarded for the value of their labor. So it's like almost an inverse meritocracy that we're talking about here, where the people who sit on the top of these companies, the executives, the CEOs, the billionaires like this guy, they reap the vast majority of the rewards of the profits that are generated by these companies, while doing significantly less work physically and all-encompassingly, much less work than the average person who is actually doing the grunt work and stocking the shelves and doing all of that stuff for their company. So it's a complete inverse meritocracy, where the laziest people, the people who are actually doing the least amount of work like him, are the ones who get to sit on top of this system, accumulate all of the wealth, and then look down on the peasants who are doing the work to make them filthy rich. But apparently he thinks that everybody's getting enriched by this journey, and he says that's the success, that's why capitalism works. I mean, again, does this look like capitalism's working very well? No. He says he called Biden, quote, the worst president in the history of this country. Listen, I mean, I'm not a fan of Biden, right? Obviously, I have my many critiques of Biden, but those are critiques that are coming from the left, right? This guy thinks he's the worst president in the history of this country because he's some sort of Marxist socialist, vanguard leader or something like that. I mean, that's how deranged this guy actually is. Worst president in the history of this country. I could definitely count a few more on my hands that would be significantly worse than him. I mean, just in recent memory, you could say the last 3 presidents we've had, 4 presidents, 5 presidents have been worse than Joe Biden, right? I think, with all of his various flaws that I talk about relentlessly on this channel, he's probably the best president of my life so far. But again, you're not really comparing him to any strong contenders there. I mean, I would say Obama was worse. I would say Trump was worse. I would say Bush was worse. I would say Clinton was worse. Certainly Reagan and Nixon and all of those other presidents from recent history were definitely worse than Biden. But apparently he thinks all of this crumbs that he's handing out to the peasants is making him the single worst president in the history of the country. It's amazing, right? And he says he has no apologies for backing Republicans, including Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor who is being touted as a contender for the GOP presidential nomination. And he says, I give my money to them because I hope they're going to do the right thing. Okay, so again, what exactly do you mean by right thing? I guess in the mind of this guy, it would basically just be like anarcho-capitalism or something like that, right? Where you basically have absolutely no regulation on the markets, you have no taxes on corporations or billionaires, or you have some sort of a flat tax. Again, completely deregulating, privatization all up and down the board in every single industry you can get your hands on. That's basically the economics that he wants to support, which is, again, pretty much the exact same economics during the neoliberal era with, moderate differences and fluctuations that has been causing the instability and has been causing the implosion of capitalism in on itself. So, I mean, again, you can keep trying to push for those things, keep trying to push for right-wing economics, but it inevitably will backfire on you. So they continue saying that Marcus said that he doesn't grasp the current trend of gearing businesses towards advancing political and social causes, and any attempt to woke him, I don't know, maybe he's been looking at Elon Musk's Twitter threads or something like that. I don't know where a 93-year-old would be getting this type of language from, but he says any attempt to woke him, as he put it, would fail. He said, okay, good for you, buddy, but let's just go back up here real quick, okay? So what is he talking about? Marcus said that he doesn't grasp the current trend of gearing businesses towards advancing political and social causes. Okay, we'll separate those two things real quick. Advancing political causes, since when in the history of the country have corporations and rich people not been political actors? I mean, this is something that, is a through line for both, to some extent, Democrats and Republicans, but, this idea that somehow economics is like this mathematical equation and that it's not political or something like that. Of course it's political. The fact that we don't have socialists that are elected members of Congress Congress, or, you know, the fact that we don't even in many schools teach adequately socialist economics and capitalism is just the default. These are all political things. Economics is always going to be political, and that doesn't even get into the, you know, that's just a fundamental fact, but that doesn't even get into the fact that all of these corporations, including the Home Depot, actively participate in politics, right? So what are you talking about? Like, oh, I don't understand gearing businesses towards political causes or something like that. He's basically just referring solely to left-wing social causes, right? And he's blending these two things. But Home Depot, you give money to all of these different politicians at the state, local, the federal level. That's what you do. That's how you gain influence. That's how you have completely corrupted our political system to the core, where we are now essentially more of an oligarchy than an actual functioning democracy, right? But he's sitting here and pretending like, oh, us, the Home Depot, we're just neutral actors here. I guess we don't really participate in politics, as I'm coming out and blaming socialism for all of the flaws that capitalism has generated in this country. I mean, you know, what are we even talking about here, right? But I mean, I guess on the social aspect of this, right, he has, you know, another follow-up statement here to that. He says, the whole idea that a business is set up for social purposes doesn't make sense to me. I mean, kind of an interesting statement there. What exactly is the mission of any business if it's not to like advance some purpose or cause or influence within society? Not exactly sure what he means by that, but I guess you could probably make a fair interpretation that he's basically talking about corporations who are making appeals to left-wing social causes on issues like abortion or gay rights or something like that. I think that's what he's really trying to critique here. But again, at a fundamental level, the reason why a lot of these corporations like to make those virtue signaling appeals to the public and pretend as if they are, you know, progressives or something like that, the whole reason they do that is for capitalist reasons. Okay, it's not because they like genuinely believe in these things. It's not because there's like some sort of a leftist capture of corporations, which is something that like Marjorie Taylor Greene has referenced before, right? She used the term corporate communism, right? This is some idea that conservatives are trying to push, that all of these companies are actually like radical left Marxists or something like that, even though they are literally the wealthiest and most influential capitalist enterprises in the world. But you know, basically, I mean, the reason why a lot of these companies make those appeals to left-wing social issues is because, number one, it's easy, it's cheap, it's free, you know, it doesn't actually materially cost their business anything. But on top of that, they're doing it because that's what the market is deciding, right? They're doing that because there is an overwhelming majority of the American people who agree with abortion rights, who agree with gay rights, and you know, civil rights for all ethnicities and races in the country, right? That's because that's the overwhelming majority of the people in this country, and so they are trying to gear their business towards the overwhelming majority of people in this country, right? I mean, that's all that is. It's a simple financial calculation for these companies, but he's pretending as if this is some sort of like a you know, Marxist takeover of corporate America or something like that, which again is something that we hear consistently from a lot of conservatives. But we'll go ahead and finish it off here just with a couple more paragraphs. They say, nonetheless, he said that Home Depot was one of the first companies that was socially conscious. What the fuck, man? You just said that's the whole idea that a business is set up for social purposes doesn't make sense to me. And then immediately followed that up by saying that the company you started was one of the first companies that was socially conscious. So what? I mean, what is your point here? I mean, listen, at the end of the day, this is, you know, obviously filled with so many contradictions and like hilarious, you know, misidentifications of the actual core problems of what's going on in the American economy. He just basically wants to use this billionaire pro-corporate propaganda in order to say that workers are just lazy. Nobody wants to work anymore. They're demanding better working conditions and better pay and better benefits, and starting to recognize that they actually have rights, that they actually have power and leverage within the economy that has not been utilized. And, you know, basically is just trying to pin this all on the workers and to say that it's all your fault that our country is destabilizing. It's your fault that our economy is situated in the way that it is right now. You're simply not working hard enough. It has nothing to do with the fact that me and other billionaires are worth billions, if not trillions and trillions of dollars, as we sit on top of our piles of cash and look down on the peasants, right, who are barely managing to scrape by, overwhelming majority of the country living paycheck to paycheck. He basically just wants people to think that there is no structural or systemic analysis of our economic framework that needs to be done, because God forbid that would be some sort of like woke politics or something like that, right? But you know, I mean, the real analysis here is that you have billionaires like this that are so out of touch with average Americans that they don't even acknowledge the fact that, I mean, there are millions of people in this country who are working, you know, full-time jobs or working multiple jobs, and they are barely getting by. And the entire reason for that is the same reason why somebody like you is worth billions and billions of dollars. It's because The way that our economy is structured under our capitalist neoliberal era model is so that, all of these companies, all of these wealthy shareholders on Wall Street get to extract maximum surplus value off of the backs of their workers, particularly by diminishing the working conditions, lowering wages or keeping them stagnant, and cutting benefits and things like that, squeezing as much out of those workers as they physically and legally can get away with. And that structure is just leading to rampant inequality. It's leading to a lot of people who are barely able to put food on the table, keep a roof over their head, afford healthcare, or afford not to go into bankruptcy because of their medical bills or anything like that. Student debt is another one. But all of those problems, I guess, according to the billionaire class, can just be wiped under the table. You simply need to pull yourselves up by your bootstraps, and if you do that, if you work hard enough, then I guess everybody in the economy is somehow magically going to become a billionaire like him.
Everyone is saying good politic guy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying